So by now, I think we have all gotten the point through that, Deshaun Watson, when he plays on the field at quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, whenever that may be, is going to be an upgrade from Baker Mayfield. I don't think that's a very debatable point. So instead of just solely focusing in today on the comp between Deshaun Watson and Baker Mayfield, which we will do some of, or at least a lot of, we're also going to try to put that comp and how much of an upgrade he is to Baker Mayfield into a context that I think is a little bit more appropriate, right? Because not only do you want to know if he's an upgrade from what the Browns had, but given what the Browns are paying him, right, $230 million guaranteed, you're also going to want to know where he stands amongst other NFL quarterbacks. And when I got to look at this whole thing, I think the best player to throw in there when we're comparing Watson's numbers to Baker Mayfield's is Russell Wilson, right? Because Russell Wilson, we know that's a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. We know that he's a franchise level quarterback, and he's also somebody that's been traded for in this same offseason. So I think throwing his numbers in there when we compare Watson, when we compare Baker Mayfield, is something that could be a bit of an helpful exercise. Now, one stat that I put in almost every quarterback that I've evaluated into this whole ringer under is bad games, right? And the way I do this is I look at every PFF grade that a player has recorded throughout their career and every QBR that they have gotten throughout their career. I categorize them into different rubrics according to what those statistics say themselves. So they're different for each team. QBR, an elite game, is 75 plus. A bad game, I believe, is under 45. And when you get to Pro Football Focus, their bad games, I believe, are under 59 are bad starts, replaceable starts, and their elite games are 90 plus, right? So it's a different rubric for each one, and however many games fall under backup or worse, so pretty much D or below quality starts, I categorize as bad games. I've done this for Jimmy Garoppolo. I've done this for Derek Carr. I've done this for Russell Wilson. I've done this for Matt Stafford. I've done this for Jared Goff, and I've done this for Baker Mayfield. So we have a baseline of where guys are with this statistic, and basically the way this lines out is a average starting quarterback that you have questions about whether you can win the Super Bowl with will give you probably anywhere from 7 on the high end, right? Kirk Cousins is 7-9, and so is Derek Carr. 7-9 bad games. But usually it's anywhere from 7 to 10 bad games, right? Anything more than 10 bad games is a bad quarterback. But there is that line, right? That 7 to 10 or bad games is pretty much average transitional level quarterback play, right? A good enough starter, might make a Pro Bowl once in a while, but not somebody you would consider franchise. A franchise level player is within that 6 to 8 bad game range, right? From the high end of the bad games being 8 and the low end to 6. And then Tom Brady is below 6, right? Tom Brady's like the only guy who consistently hits below 6 bad games. And that's why he's Tom Brady, is because he's incredibly consistent and incredibly good no matter what the situation is. So that's really the scale. Now, where does Deshaun Watson fit on that scale? Well, let's bring up his QBR PFF chart. And here you will see that Deshaun Watson is at 6 to 7 bad games, right? PFF says he'll be at 6 bad games, and I think QBR gives him about 7 throughout his career. Now, one thing's being noted, he, I think, has played more games than Jimmy Garoppolo, but less games than Baker Mayfield. So this is not a huge sample size, but it's a big enough sample size, right? 57 games, a big enough sample size to know where he's at. And again, when you look at these charts, one of the things visually you want to see is the long starter column, right? Because yes, it's nice to have elite games. It's nice to have Pro Bowl level games, but you really want to sit a good amount of your games here because you can win with this and it doesn't require too much. And you really want this to taper off when you get to backup and replaceable games. You always want it to lean one direction, right? Especially with QBR, you want this to lean towards that direction, right? Other charts, they don't lean towards that direction. So That's where Watson is. 6 to 7 bad games. Who are the other quarterbacks that we have talked about that have been in that range? Russell Wilson is 6 to 7 bad games. I believe Matt Stafford is 6 to 8 bad games, right? So on the worst end, he's a little bit worse. Matt Stafford is than Deshaun Watson. But that's pretty much the range. And that is elite range, right? In the NFL, 6 to 7 bad games is considered elite, right? There's that, and then there's Tom Brady. And then everything else is pretty much, that's elite. 6 to 7 bad games is definitely Super Bowl quality quarterback play. It's obviously very, very good there. So that's one metric that we can look at this whole thing and this upgrade by. But there are other metrics that I want to bring up here. Now, we're going to go through about 3 years, my bad. 3 years of advanced accuracy metrics. And again, we're going to have Baker Mayfield, Russell Wilson, and Deshaun Watson all involved here. So we're going to start with 2018 and bring that up. And this is what 2018 gets us, right? When you look at his 2018 numbers, he was 23rd in interception percentage. Again, remember with interception percentage, you want to be closer to 32 than you are to 1. So 23rd in interception percentage. Russell Wilson that year was 27th. Baker Mayfield that year was 9th, right? So that's not necessarily a great interception percentage that he has going there. Bad throw percentage, Watson was 15th. Again, you want to be closer to 32 than 1. Mayfield was around the same, right? 16, and then Wilson was 23rd. He takes home the gold medal in that one. The interesting thing with Watson is that his completed air yards per pass attempts is always like top of the league. So that means that he is not getting easy completions, right? Baker Mayfield has jumped up and down in this statistic, and Russ stays around like 10, but he's always at top 5, which puts his numbers in context. And we'll get to this even more when I start talking about some of the 2019 numbers, because, some of the other numbers that we see here, because that's where this becomes a lot more interesting. All right. So now we're going to look at 2019, right? We're going to try to get that up. And when you look at 2019, this is interesting. Again, Watson, 12th in interception percentage. That's interesting, right? Again, you want to be closer to 32. This is probably his worst year I think he had when it came to interception percentage. Mayfield was, second that year? Now, I have red flags and I have gold medals next to some of these statistics. If there is a red flag next to a statistic, that doesn't mean it's not just like the worst one there, because sometimes you can be the worst one there, but it's not really that big of a deal. But it means that number is bad in context to all 32 quarterbacks around the league, right? Like, that's just a bad number that you should be aware of, right? So Mayfield, that second interception percentage, obviously that's really bad. Wilson, 30th in the NFL. Again, Wilson had a really, really good 2019. On target percentage, though, Watson, 9th. He's a very accurate quarterback. Again, Baker Mayfield, 31st. You want to be away from the 31st spot for this. So you want to be higher than 1 here. Wilson, 11th. The bad throw percentage, again, this is another stat where you don't want to be at number 1. Watson at 22, Wilson at 9, Mayfield at 14. So again, just some variance within this. And what makes and puts a lot of Watson's stats in context is that completed air yard number per pass attempt, 8th. He's consistently around the top 10 there. And yet he's consistently also pretty high in his advanced accuracy numbers year after year, which suggests to me that this is a very, very accurate quarterback who's able to take some chances. And we'll get to big time throws in just a second. Now we're going to bring up the 2020 numbers. Obviously, it's the last year we can really chart of Deshaun Watson. Well, all three, Deshaun Watson, Baker Mayfield, and Russell Wilson, because these are only 3 years where they've all played 4 years together. And this was one of those years where Deshaun Watson just completely washed the field, right? 32nd in interception percentage. Now, this was a good year for Baker Mayfield. His 1 year where he wasn't in the top 10, 28th, and Russell Wilson was 15th. Mayfield bested Wilson in that one. But here is where it gets very interesting. Again, these advanced targeting and advanced accuracy metrics are important, and it's why I think some teams are hesitant when it comes to Baker Mayfield, because these numbers have never been good for a guy who calls himself a very accurate quarterback, right? The on-target percentage for Watson, again, 5th. Look at that completed air yards per pass attempt. Number 1 in the NFL. So not only was he throwing the longest pass attempts in football that year. He was also on target the 5th most out of anybody, and also threw the least bad footballs out of anybody. You compare that to Baker Mayfield, who, yes, he was number 3 in completed air yards per pass attempt, so difficulty of throw was up there, but he was also off target a lot, and he threw a lot of bad footballs. So that is the difference, right? When you talk about Baker Mayfield and what Baker Mayfield can do, even at the high end, right? When we're talking about Baker Mayfield's best year of work, he's not going to be as accurate as Deshaun Watson, and he's not going to be as efficient as Deshaun Watson when he's on the football field, right? So that's really the biggest difference between the two, right? Even if you compare the best of Baker Mayfield to the best of Watson, like that's the issue. Even the worst of Watson, that's the issue right there, at least on the football field, is the ability to be accurate with where they place the football. And when that is the case, right, when you're not accurate, some years you'll get lucky and you won't throw that many interceptions just because you get dropped interceptions or people aren't there or people aren't paying attention, or whatever. Interceptions can sometimes be a bit of a stat that's based more on happenstance more than results, and that can happen with you. But when you see these accuracy numbers and they're this bad for 3 years with Baker Mayfield, and honestly he doesn't have a single good year of on target or bad throw percentage in his career, that gives you a lot of information there to go off of. Russell Wilson, again, he was at 15th interception percentage in 2020. On target percentage was 7, so pretty good there. Bad throw percentage 23. Again, you want to have top 10 on target and then bottom half of the league in that bad throw percentage. Baker Mayfield did the inverse of that, which is an issue, right? And again, Russ, 6 most difficult throws in the league, or at least 6 most air yards completed per pass attempts in the league. Watson was first, which makes everything that he did in 2020, in hindsight, very, 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 very impressive. So that is just the accuracy metrics. But what are some of the metrics when it comes to his ability to just make big throws and keep the ball away from being turned over, right? You heard me say this earlier in the video where I was like, hey, interceptions aren't necessarily the best metric. Well, interceptions and completion percentage aren't necessarily the best metric to look at how accurate a quarterback is, right? I think it's a very flawed way of looking at things. So what do I look at? Okay. Well, there's turnover-worthy plays, which is TWP in this chart. There's big-time throws. There's adjusted completion percentage, and there's pressure to sacks. All right. So when it comes to turnover-worthy plays, these are plays that were worthy of a turnover. That doesn't mean that necessarily netted a turnover, but worthy of a turnover, right? And this means that, hey, sometimes guys can have like Carson Wentz is a great example of this, right? I don't know the exact numbers, but I know that last year he didn't throw that many interceptions, but he had a lot of turnover-worthy plays. Daniel Jones is another one who didn't have a lot of interceptions, but had a ton of turnover-worthy plays, right? So when that's the case, right, when you have a lot of turnover-worthy plays, it tells you that the interceptions, the fumbles, the turnovers, they're just waiting to happen. They just didn't happen for that given year for whatever reason, right? You got lucky that year, and it's going to be very hard to replicate that. So the lower in the league you are at turnover-worthy plays, the more likely it is that you're not going to be a turnover magnet. When you look at Watson, this is the last season they've played. So for Mayfield and Wilson, it's 2021. For Watson, it's 2020. For obvious reasons, Watson didn't play in 2021. Turnover-worthy plays for Watson was 25th in the league. Now, PFF only charts guys who had 50% of their snaps, and 25th was like the absolute lowest you could have been in there. So that's pretty good, right? He throws the least amount of turnover-worthy plays in football for at least 2020. Baker Mayfield was 5th. Wilson was pretty good there with 21. Big-time throws. Again, you want to be low in turnover-worthy plays, high in big-time throws. This is what Watson was, right? Didn't throw a lot of turnover-worthy balls, but also gave you some big-time throws. You don't ever want to rank higher in turnover-worthy plays than you do in big-time throws, because that's not good. Baker Mayfield in 2021 obviously didn't have a good season, outranked himself in that metric. That's not good. Wilson, 21st in turnover-worthy plays, but you'll take it because, hey, look, 2nd in the league in big-time throws, right? You want to be able to be high risk, high reward, and if your risk is matching your reward, so if you're equal with each other, okay, right? But if your risk does not match your reward, which means you're risking the ball far more than you're rewarding the play of the ball, that's not good quarterback play. Adjusted completion percentage, Watson was 9th, Mayfield 26th, Wilson 21st. So Watson significantly better, at least in 2020, than these guys were the last time they've played. And the pressure to sack numbers for all three of these quarterbacks are bad, but it's a different type of bad, right? Mayfield first in pressure to sack numbers. That means he held the ball a lot and got sacked a lot. Watson 6 means he holds the ball a lot and sometimes gets sacked. Wilson 8th, holds the ball a lot, gets sacked. This is a problem because you can create more pressure than is necessary when this number is high. So it's not a good thing. It's something he does need to cut out on, but it's something worth acknowledging that Watson and Wilson are both threats to run the ball. Mayfield, while not a non-factor with the ball in his hands as a runner, not necessarily somebody you're going to spy, right? So those two are guys you're going to spy, you're going to worry about when they have the football in their hands and if they may or may not run. Mayfield not. So him being number 1 in pressure to sack, given that he's not a super mobile quarterback, is an extra detriment to him when it comes to that number, whereas Watson and Wilson are more apt to have that number mean less to their play just because they're able to run and make teams pay for that, right? So again, it's one of those ways where you have to put numbers in context, right? Because you can look at it and say, hey, they're all bad, they all get sacked a lot, but when you put it into context, you go, okay, well, Watson, he can run a little bit, so it's not that big of a deal. And same thing with Wilson. With Mayfield, he can't run, and that's probably why he's number 1, right? And it's not that he can't run. That's probably saying it a little bit too much. He's athletic enough, but he's not a threat with the football in his hands to run. Like, nobody is game planning for that. Now let's look at some of the career. These are the same numbers, but we're looking at the career advanced passing metrics. So if you average them out through their career, where are they at? Watson, turnover worthy plays 3, Mayfield 3.9, Wilson 2.7. So it's very good for Wilson. Watson very close to Wilson in that metric. When you look at these numbers, I think Wilson will probably lead in all of them because of the body of work that he's put out. He's had his best years in the NFL. The thing you would be betting on Watson is that his best years are in front of him, right? But still, the fact that these numbers are going to be as close to Russ's as they are says a lot. Now, big time throws, him and Mayfield are about the same. Russ is a class ahead of them both at 6.8. This is why Russ was one of the best quarterbacks for a while here, right? He's starting to edge out of his prime now, but when he was in his prime, I think people severely underrate how good he was. Just the completion percentage, Watson and Wilson are pretty similar here. I think they're only off by 1 decimal, and Mayfield's down by 2 percentage points. It's a little bit of a red flag there. And again, pressure to sack numbers, Wilson throughout his career has been much better at this than he has been recently. So that's a little bit of concern if you're Denver, that his sack numbers have went up. His pressure to sack percentage has went up over the last few years. It shows a decline in his mobility. But Watson and Mayfield are both not great at this, right? They're going to take some bad sacks, right? If you have Watson, if you have Mayfield, you're going to take some bad sacks. Every once in a while, you're going to get behind the sticks. The thing is, with Deshaun Watson, it seems to be more likely that he's going to make a big throw to get out of that or make the accurate throw to get out of that situation than it is with Baker Mayfield. So again, these things just kind of pile up on top of each other. So that is a hard statistical look at the upgrade between Deshaun Watson and Baker Mayfield while putting it in context with another quarterback who's seen around that level. So now we have a good measure, and I want people to see this just so they have an accurate measure of what this quarterback is going to be here, because I think we see highlight tapes a lot, right? On social media or on YouTube, and we get excited about them, and we start to expect the highlight tape when we watch the full 2-hour game. And that's just not the case, right? The reality of it is that even Tom Brady is going to give you 5 bad games. An elite quarterback is going to give you 6 to 8 bad games. And that's something that people need to know going into it, right? Where is Deshaun Watson going to struggle? His pressure to sack numbers aren't great. He could do a lot better at getting rid of the football at times and giving up on a play. Again, a lot of the flaws that you can see in a Joe Burrow, you'll see in Deshaun Watson. A lot of the positives you see in a Joe Burrow, you're also going to see in Deshaun Watson, right? They're very similar players. But I think since we have not seen Deshaun Watson play in over a year, and all we have to go off of is really highlights, we're going to expect the highlight reel, right? Especially how people have talked about it. They're going to expect the highlight reel. And I think it's important to have a realistic picture of what you're getting with Deshaun Watson, which is a very good quarterback, an elite level quarterback at times, who has some issues, right? The pressure to sack numbers need to be better. I think he can stand to have more big time throws, even though it's not really that big of a deal, but it's more of a career thing for him. But that's what you're getting out of Deshaun Watson. That's a realistic overview of some of the numbers and what the upgrade is with from Baker Mayfield, and why some of those upgrades are very significant when you talk about on the field from a football standpoint, and why it opens up a lot of things for Cleveland Browns. But that's my thoughts on this whole video. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Again, guys, thank you for watching. You have a great day. Have a good night.